Hi guys, it's Phil
And Liam
from Die Hard on a Black, and we're excited to talk to you about a brand new podcast we're launching called 48 Hours of Buddy Movies.
That's right, folks. 48-hour-long
approximately
episodes exploring 48 different buddy movies, beginning with the original classic that started it all, Walter Hill's 1982 masterpiece, 48 Hours, starring Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy.
And just like Die Hard on a Blank, our new show will explore the influence of 48 Hours on the action genre, one buddy movie at a time.
We'll be covering iconic franchises such as the Beverly Hills Cop movies, the Stakeout movies, the Bad Boys movies, classics of the genre like Running Scared,
Hyams Hive Rise Up,
Midnight Run, Red Heat, Tango and Cash, The Hard Way,
plus tough thrillers such as To Live and Die in LA, Black Rain, Point Break, Training Day, and The Way of the Gun.
as well as a few wild cards that you might not expect, such as RoboCop, Alien Nation, and, of course, Phil's favorite,
Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
So, if you're a fan of two buddies talking buddy movies,
Then 48 Hours of Buddy Movies is for you.
visit patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe for the price of 1 cup of coffee a month.
See you in the squad car.
Or walking to the squad car, mildly irritated that we've been paired off.
Wherever. That's patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe. Welcome to Die Hard on a Blank, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Philip Gawthorne, and with me as always is Liam Billingham, and today's film is Deep Rising.
It's Die Hard in a creature feature.
We debated on this because I was just asking
tough.
Liam off Die Hard on the Mary Celeste, but I wasn't sure if that
And
landed.
I wasn't smart enough to know what that was.
Die Hard in a sea monster movie was dismissed, and what do you?
But the vibes
Yeah.
of this movie are a creature feature.
Yes,
And Stephen Sommers understands the assignment. And who better to talk to about this movie than returning champion Rob Hackett? Rob Hackett, welcome back to the show.
Oh, guys, thanks for having me. I've been waiting for this day. I've probably watched Deep Rising 15 times since I last saw you in preparation.
wow, love it.
I love this
Is
movie.
that an undercut or undercount? Do you think maybe it's a little bit higher than that?
It could be. I will just tell you, I remember being a kid and seeing the trailer for this movie, and when the woman gets sucked into the toilet, I was like, dude,
all your boxes were ticked in that moment.
That's Rob special, as we like to say. That's Robbie special. Or Rob.
That's right.
Now,
That's
Rob
right.
is the perfect person to talk about this movie. We're so excited to get your take on it because you're a huge genre fan, and of course, as you're in your professional capacity, you're really operating like at the apex of this, of elevated genre stuff, right? So, just tell us a little bit about that, just so that if for shame if you don't know about Rob's previous appearance on the show on Terminal Velocity, sort it out. But if you're
Get
just
better.
coming to it fresh, Rob, tell us a little bit about yourself for the uninitiated.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to work for James Wan and his company Atomic Monster. And we recently merged with Blumhouse. And so we are sort of a super genre company. And we traffic in these kinds of movies. And I will tell you that we have a round, like a spinner of DVDs in the office. And Deep Rising is featured on there as something that the interns must watch to understand the DNA of the company.
Oh,
so there you go.
That's
I've
why you're
got
the perfect,
goosebumps.
perfect fellow to unpack this with. So let's start. Let's start by telling us when. I'm assuming you got your relationship with this movie goes way back. Tell us about when you first saw this movie and any recollections that you have of it.
Well, no joke. I remember seeing the trailer, and I don't remember what movie it was attached to, but I remember being like, okay, you have mercenaries taking over an abandoned cruise liner, check. People being slaughtered by some sort of crazy monster on this cruise ship, check. You have really cool semi-futuristic guns that have like multiple barrels firing at the same time, check. Treat Williams coming off of those, things to do in Denver when you're dead, check. I was like, this was everything that I wanted. And so I remember going to see it in the theater with a couple of friends. And I think my dad took us too. And I remember the theater was very sparsely populated. And I was like, why aren't more people watching this movie? And then I realized because Titanic was playing in the other theater. So that's why no one went to see it. But I remember coming out being like, this movie is amazing. Yeah. Like it, and at that age, I didn't necessarily know all the reasons beyond the ones I just listed. But reflecting back on it, I'm like, it's so fun. Like it has this aspirational, like, it's unapologetic about what it is, but like unlike say The Relic, which I also love very much, this feels so much more self-aware and even borders into tongue-in-cheek every now and then, that like when I remember seeing in the theater with my friends and we were laughing and we were just having such a good time, it felt so participatory. Like, yeah, man, this movie's just rad.
I love it.
It's just awesome.
I love it. Yeah. Your passion for this, I think, is really, is infectious and completely justified. Liam, was it a new watch for you, this one? Were you aware of it culturally?
So the image of Treat Williams and Famke Hansen, Bestill My Heart, jet skiing out of the ship while it exploded is like burned into my memory.
Yeah.
I did not see this in the theater. I've been aware of it forever. I watched it. Maybe I caught a few minutes of it on TV at some point, but I caught it in its entirety this week. And holy shit, this movie kicks fucking ass from beginning to end. It is such a joy. It is such just like a blast to watch. And I think my biggest takeaway is that, like, I'm a huge The Mummy guy.
Yeah.
And so I think Stephen Sommers and I'm really curious to hear you unpack this, Rob, is a master of tone. And I think on top of that, the sort of strands of other blockbuster movies that he combines in this thing really, really fascinate me. So, like, I'm a rising, Deep Rising fan. Let's put it that way.
Fair.
Yeah, I agree. Like, the movie has... Like, The Mummy was like this, too. Like, Deep Rising feels like the most R-rated PG movie I've ever seen. Like, it feels like it was made for kids.
Is it not R-rated?
It is, but I mean, like...
I see what you mean. Yeah, the tone.
The tone is so... it feels like it was made for kids because it's so much fun and swashbuckling and escapist, like The Mummy was. But yet it has the gore element, which is like Chuck Russell's The Blob.
Well, that's what makes this cool for me. I was new to this as well. This had been on my radar for the longest time. I remember when it's weird. It's kind of weird that I didn't see it when it came out, because this is, as you said, like it was ticking all my boxes. Very Aliens, right? Like the soldiers arrive to the aftermath of the carnage and yada, all of that type of stuff, right? So this was right in my wheelhouse. For whatever reason, it passed me by, and it had been a vastly it was approaching to do it for this, and I loved it. Oh my gosh, I loved it. It was such a delight. It really was like so fun. And to your point, I totally agree with you about the R-rated thing might have affected the box office, but it's what makes this cool. I love that it doesn't pull punches on the gore. At the same time, it isn't like oppressive or unpleasant. It's like a delightful watch. I had an absolute blast with it. So I'm excited to talk more about it. But let's just start with some fast facts to put this in a little context. So it's interesting because your description kind of summarized perfectly its reaction, right, when you went to see it, in the sense of it being like a small group of you loved it, but this theater was empty to some extent, which kind of like tells its own story. So Deep Rising was released in the US by Hollywood Pictures and Synergy Pictures on January 30th, 1998, 2 weeks after our last film, the similarly waterlogged Hard Rain, which came out January 16th of that year. Approximately 9.5 years now after Die Hard. Written and directed by the aforementioned Stephen Sommers, produced by Lawrence Mark and John Baldecchi. It stars Treat Williams, Famke Janssen, Anthony Heald, I have a story about him later, Kevin J. O'Connor, Wes Studi, Jason Fleming, Cliff Curtis, Jimon Honsu, and pretty incredible cast.
Yeah.
And on an estimated budget of $45 million, it grossed just $11.5 million at the box office, therefore considered a flop at the time, but has since gone on to gain a substantial cult following and really launched Stephen Sommers' career and went on to do, some pretty impressive franchise work and all manner of stuff.
Can I tell a funny, just a very, very quick story? After I watched this, I went on Letterboxd to log it because I'm who I am as a person. I'm contractually obligated to do that. And there was a review from past guest to the show, Jamel Bowie, New York Times opinion editor, very erudite intellectual, and all the review said was, "This movie fucking rules." Like, that was the entirety of the review. And I was like, that about sums it up. This movie just rules. Like, it rules.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where it like delivers on the promise. Like, when you were a kid and you'd go through the video store and you'd look at the cover and you're like, and the cover is probably the best part of the movie in some cases. This movie like lives up to that image on the cover of Famke Janssen and Treat Williams on it's just packed with cool shit.
Well, that's interesting, because that image is like a ride, right? Like something you might do at a water park, the image of them on the jet ski. It's the perfect iconography that captures the spirit of this film. It's kind of wild, fun. You're going to get wet if you're sitting in the front row, that type of thing, right? It has that. It's almost like this could be the most gory thing that you would see at Universal Studios. It's like a 15-minute 3D experience, It's very experiential and fun.
It feels like it's kind of in the lineage to me of also those early 90s movies like The Shadow and The Rocketeer, where it has, obviously much more adult, but it feels like, okay, those 11-year-old boys are now able to go to the movies by themselves. Like, let's make them like more of a violent creature feature kind of
DC comic type, like pulpy, right?
EC Comics,
or
right?
EC Comics, rather, or both.
Totally, that's what I thought. Those covers, those EC Comics covers feel
pulpy,
like this movie.
splashy, Let's talk a little bit about then, but why we're doing it on this show, because it is potentially a little bit of a stretch. I'd kind of committed to this as being like, we're just going to do it. Like, and I loved it so much, that I was like, whether it's qualifiers or not, we have to do it. But I would say there's quite a lot of what we like to call
Die DNA. Amazing setup, Phil.
In this. I like to throw those alley-oops, whether you slam them or not, it's up to you. Although there are some elements of a classical Die Hard on a Blank premise here, bad guys take over a blank. It's up to one guy to save the day. This is it struck me as kind of a mashup of like different story shapes as featured in films like we already kind of mentioned, Aliens, but like Predator, both of which, of course, Predator being directed by Die Hard's John McTiernan, lest we forget, but also Titanic, Poseidon Adventure, The Relic, which we mentioned, The Thing a little bit, and then 40,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And another movie that reminded me a lot of, especially in terms of like mastering that tone that's really hard to do of horror comedy, was Tremors. It sort of really had that kind of like
great
fun,
comp.
Yeah.
I worship Tremors. It's one of my most watched and favorite movies, which are usually distinct lists, but in that case, it's on both of them. And you're right. And I think in both cases, the movies were theatrical failures. And I think because, and Phil, you know this, I'm sure, like it's so hard for marketing to distinguish one, like a genre hybrid. So they usually pick a lane and it ends up being the wrong one.
Right.
Or they don't convey what's special about a Tremors or a Deep Rising, which is like, it's fun, it's scary, it's action packed, it's all those things. And it's really hard and it's very rare. And also you mentioned, Liam, The Shadow, also a financial failure, and The Rocketeer, a financial failure, all kind of genre hybrids.
Yeah,
interesting.
And all later vindicated, I think, have all kind of become a kind of B movie cult classic.
Right.
I also wonder, I thought a lot of, maybe we'll talk about this more later, but I thought a lot about Spielberg watching this movie. And there's the Spielberg awe when they see the final sea monster at the end. And I sometimes wonder if like post Jurassic Park, people were like, I kind of want my visual effects movies to be a little more like optimistic or like a little more like a little less in the horror vein than this is. Like, I sometimes wonder if it'd be different if this were like a late 80s movie, though the technology would not have been
yeah,
there,
it might have
of course.
fitted into. You remember there was that whole. I mean, sure, you've probably got the 4Ks of all these, the Deep Star Sixes, the fucking Leviathans, right? All of those sort of
Totally.
When the Abyss was mooted, they were already like, okay, that's what Cameron's doing. Let's go rip it off quick, knock out these B features. It felt almost like it's 10 years after that, but it felt like it was in that wheelhouse, but done right, to some extent.
It's funny. This is a funny aside, but we were, we are, there's a conversation happening about us rebooting RoboCop as a series. And we were talking about Mr. Peter Weller. And I had told my boss, James, I said, of all the things I want to ask Weller about, I want to know what the hell was Leviathan. Like, I want to know what that movie was like behind the scenes. More than anything, because it's such a batshit crazy movie. It's crazy.
I almost bought the 4K a few weeks ago, and then I was like, I should probably watch this.
Yeah, don't. Save your money.
You're better off watching Deep Rising, to be honest with you.
Okay, sign me up.
There is some other legitimate Die Hard DNA stuff as well, and there's also, as in Die Hard and Speed 2, the plot kickstarts when a lavish party is interrupted by a terror attack. It's primarily confined to a single location where the main characters are trapped and terrorized and have to sneak around corridors and shafts to avoid detection. It's kind of a heist movie, right? Like the group of colorful mercenaries planning a big score, being thwarted by events beyond their control. Lots of elevator action, gruesome activities in elevators, nasty surprises in elevators, elevators spattered with blood, all of which are Die Hard adjacent.
Are elevators Philly special in action movies, Phil?
If it's drop zone, yeah. We also have a main character, I think, who has a great sense of humor, extremely self-deprecating, talks to himself a lot. McClane does a lot of that kind of monologuing and soliloquizing. You've got our leading lady and action royalty, Famke Janssen, stripping down to a McClane-esque white undershirt by the end of the film. There was a line of dialogue as well that caught my attention where Finnegan says, you didn't hire me for my social graces, which to me was very similar to the line that Theo says in Die Hard, which I'm sure you know, Rob.
Charming personality.
Exactly.
That's right.
You didn't bring me along for my charming personality. You also have editor John Wright, who edited Die Hard with a Vengeance, as well as many other Die Hard on a Blank films, including The Hunt for Red October, Last Action Hero, Speed, and Broken Arrow. Those were the ones that I caught, but did you have anything to add for Die Hard DNA or thoughts?
No, but I do want to say this editor, he does, I don't know if you listened to the commentary on the Blu-ray, the Kino Lorber Blu-ray with Stephen Summers, but he has his editor on with him. And this guy, I mean, the guy that edited Speed is obviously a master,
right?
Like Speed has got to be one of the best movies ever, ever. And I think this movie is exceptionally well cut, just in terms of how big that ensemble actually is and all the parallel action. It does a really good job.
He's pretty elite. I mean, for a myriad of reasons, but yeah, certainly like pacing and kinetics and
I also.
Clarity.
This movie is actually weirdly sophisticated because you have like the scheme of the billionaire who owns the ship. You have Famke Janssen as this like jewel thief, right? You have the West Studios crew trying to like sink the ship. You have the interpersonal dynamics between Treat Williams and Kevin J. O'Connor. Like, there's actually a lot going on in this movie. And it requires a like high level of setup, and I think the sort of balancing act of the various subplots in this movie is like very impressively done. Adroit is the right word.
Yeah, and for a movie that's less than 2 hours long, it's incredibly economic in how it does all of that. Like, it's really impressive. And
totally.
Summers was anyway. I'm sure we'll get into it, but there's Die Hard DNA all over it, like you said, Phil. And I also just think in general, the humor, like it's like Die Hard is such a funny movie, and this in some ways invites the audience to laugh along with it the same way that Die Hard does. And I think that's one of the keys to its success.
Yes,
totally.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I like the kind of tone of people like Like, no one seems to be taking it that seriously, even though
That's
their
right.
life is in danger. And, like, that's pretty impressive when you can make both of those things work
I agree.
simultaneously.
Well, let's dig into all that in a bit more detail when we come back with Anatomy of an Action Movie after this quick break. And we're back with our next section of the show, Anatomy of an Action Movie, where we explore the tenets.
We live in a twilight world.
You want to do it, Rob? You know the deal. No, you're out. You're out.
I don't want to give you guys a false impression.
I love it.
That
Okay.
I'm a big fan.
I'm out of here. I'm out of here.
Wow. Okay. Wow. You left me hanging.
Rob, Phil, say the line. Phil, say the line.
There are no friends at dusk, but Rob's still one of our
Apparently
friends.
there
Rob's still
aren't.
our friend. So the first tenet of Anatomy of an Action Movie is the premise. The premise of Deep Rising, for anyone that is unfamiliar, is as follows. So, during a rough storm, Captain John Finnegan, Treat Williams, and his crew are hired by a group of mercenaries to take them to an undisclosed location in the South China Sea. Unbeknownst to Finnegan, the mercenaries plan to hijack and rob a recently built luxury cruise liner, but when they arrive, they find the massive ship eerily deserted. As the group attempt to uncover this mystery and complete their mission, they realize that the entire ship is infested with deadly tentacular beasties who have slaughtered everybody on board. And the ticking clock is, can Finnegan and the group find a way to escape this floating death house before the damaged ship sinks into the murky depths? Pretty good. Clear.
You have a career writing log lines.
You're amazing at this.
I have to do it. I have to
incredible.
do it all the time.
Yeah,
It's
that
often
makes
it's a
sense.
whole process of distilling things into like something that's kind of it's relatively clean. Pretty. I mean, it's not the interest. That's not like reinventing the wheel as a premise. I think conceptually, this film is like fine, but it's the tone. It's the tone. It's the style. It's the sense of joy that just bursts through the screen. I think that actually makes this the cast and also the casting. We'll get into those one by one. But just as general thoughts, on the movie in a bit more detail. It's just B movie perfection, and that's a compliment, not a diss,
Yeah.
Why do you love it so much, Rob?
It's all the things that you said, but it is the sense of fun. Like it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's obvious that Summers was ahead of his time. I mean, it's only a year later that he goes to make The Mummy with the exact same formula, pretty much, and that movie becomes a colossal global success. And I do think it's that self-aware quality that it's telling the audience, we're not taking this seriously. We know all these tropes. We're inviting you in to experience it with us and to laugh with us. And, a lot of movies take themselves too seriously to allow their audience that kind of access. Even The Relic, I think, oftentimes it is a self-serious movie, and I love that movie. But I think if it had a little bit more of this sense of humor, it might have been even more successful. And I think that's what I love. And I love Treat Williams. Like, I think a guy like that didn't get as many leading man opportunities as he probably deserved at this point in his career. And he's got it all. He's super handsome. He's physically really imposing, but he's also incredibly charming. And I think he's secretly one of the reasons the movie's so successful is that he's in on the joke.
1,000%.
He doesn't have an issue with it. And again, I think Brendan Fraser basically plays the same character the next year in The Mummy to enormous acclaim. And you're like, well, what happened?
Yeah.
One of the great Brendan Fraser performances.
Yeah,
you're right. He sort of had bottled a kind of tonal formula that he was then able to replicate in, Mummy being more of an established property. Brendan Fraser maybe being in a really exciting place in his career also had the perfect kind of understanding of how to play that character. He's also has the physique of an action star, but the sense of humor of a comedy star, right? So he's perfect for that. And Treat Williams, I think, also is similar in that sense. Do you have anything to add about the general stuff, Liam, before we move into the hero?
I would just say that I think Stephen Sommers is the MVP of the movie for a couple reasons. One is don't underestimate the complexity of pulling off a tone like this, because this movie is Die Hard meets The Creature from the Black Lagoon meets Spielbergian Awe meets Jaws. There's a lot of Jaws in this movie. There's a lot of Jurassic Park in this movie.
Yeah.
There's but when I'll get into my thoughts about Treat Williams here, but Stephen Sommers seems to have been like a nerd who spent every Saturday at the movies, and he's created this tone that may seem obvious, but I think is much more complex to put together, and I think that's impressive.
I have a question for you, Rob, as a connoisseur of this genre, based on that point, which is like, I have personally reached a point as a moviegoer where I hate irony in movies, and I hate the winking at the camera that goes on, and the kind of, we're not taking this too seriously. And I'm not going to name names, but you can kind of intuit probably which, sort of types of movies have this type of shtick that I now find absolutely insufferable. Why is it in this? But yet this film, loved it. Can you put your finger on the difference as to why, in your opinion, as an expert?
I can venture a guess, which is, and I think Tremors to a slightly lesser extent does this, is they never let go of their stakes, right? I think there's a difference between whistling through the graveyard, but still being in danger. I think the back half of Jaws does this really well too, where these guys, the way they're rendered as characters, you understand that they might confront real danger like this, but it is real danger, and the violence is very real in Jaws, and it's very real. Not real, but it's the violence. There's a lot of violence in this movie that reminds you of what they're up against and what the stakes are. Whereas I think what you're talking about, Phil, is where there isn't really any on-screen violence in some of the things that you're talking about, and when there is, it's treated in such a cartoonish way that it's sort of, there are no stakes. And I think that's the key with Sommers, is that he never lets go of the stakes of the situation. Like, you might fall in love with a character, and he's not afraid to take them off the board. And so I think that that's really important. And I think as a screenwriter, he understood that going way back, like before this movie. He wrote the movie Gunman, which Darren Sarafian directed, and the script was also really good, but those characters were always in jeopardy, despite the fact that they were poking fun at their circumstances. And I think, I read the script for this. It was called Tentacle. I went and tracked it down, and he is very aware of what he's doing and in control on the page. But he's never lets go of those stakes. Like, the characters are never not afraid that they might die.
Yeah. And that I think Die Hard itself is an interesting example of that, right? It's such a funny movie, as you said, and it does have moments that are, John McClane makes a lot of wisecracks, right? Welcome to the party, pal, and his comments to himself. But you never the film never loses sight of the very real life and death stakes that the characters are in. So that's a really interesting distinction. And I'm glad you kind of nailed down a little bit more on that point, because horror comedy is a hard tone to pull off, and there've been some great examples: Gremlins, Ghostbusters, you could say, things like that. But even Ghostbusters, which is more of an out-and-out comedy, it's scary at times, especially it becomes almost apocalyptic towards in the last act of that movie. So I do agree with you. I think that's a really, really astute point. Let's move on to the hero then, who I mean, what can you say? I know it's such a it's a cliche and an obvious thing to say, but like, is there a more aptly named actor than Treat Williams? I mean, he is such a delight in this movie. I'm a huge fan of his from, very serious work like Prince in the City, which we talked about a little bit on our Striking Distance episode as like one of the somewhat lesser known, except super hardcore cinephiles, but culturally not as well known as, Serpico or the classic kind of Sidney Lumet corrupt cop stuff, but one of the greats. And he just knows exactly what movie he's in, doesn't he? In this, like, he's perfect, so great. I've always, like you, I was a big fan of Critical Bill, Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, which I think might be my first access point to Treat Williams, actually. He's brilliant in that. He's so much fun, done so much, interesting and diverse work. But what else can you say about the man, the myth, the legend, Treat Williams?
It's funny. I actually think I was exposed to him. I'd seen Prince of the City too. And I'll be honest with you, like, he got a lot of acclaim for that performance. And I personally, he's a very theatrical performer. Like, he makes big choices. And I think that's interesting for a Sidney Lumet movie. His stuff is always so grounded. And I find in that, and not to critique that movie too much, because I think it is really good. I find his performance is sometimes bigger than the movie. But my first exposure to him was in a And if you've never seen it, it's wonderful. A movie with him and Laura Dern called Straight Talk. I believe it's called Straight Talk or Smooth Talk.
Smooth Talk.
That's right. And
I like Smooth Talk.
And it's a remarkable performance because he has to be charming, but he is so smoothly dangerous. And I actually think that is the secret ingredient to the character. And I think he brings it here, even though he does bury it, but he feels dangerous to me.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't say Brendan Fraser necessarily brings that edge, but I think there's something about Treat Williams where, as accessible as he is in this movie and as funny as he is, I think because he's slightly unknowable to the audience because he's just not as big a marquee name. There's a little bit of you don't know what he's capable of.
Well, there's a character he played in a movie that we talked about a lot, Liam, Devil's Own, where he plays a terrifying arms dealer who does something really, really shocking and vicious at a certain point in the film. I won't spoil what it is, but yeah, he's got quite a lot of range. But he is interesting, isn't he? Because, like you said, he is very handsome. He's not pretty. He's very handsome, and he played. I think his break was doing Danny Zuko in Grease. I think he originated the role.
Originated it.
Is that right? Yeah. So, that tells you a lot about him, and that's obviously a sort of sexy character and stuff, right? But yet there is this. There's a strong masculine edge to him, and he's got such a great sense of humor, and he doesn't seem to take himself too seriously. Certainly not in this part, but in other things I've seen as well. The fact that he did a movie. I've never seen this movie, but the Roger Corman Dead Heat movie, I imagine. Like, have you seen that one?
Oh, yeah. I would assume you guys were going to cover it on your 48 hours.
Maybe, yeah. I've thought about it, but yeah.
Well,
Joe Piscopo.
Written by Shane Black's brother, Terry Black.
Okay.
Terry Black wrote it, and it's directed by another very famous editor. I believe one of the editors of Die Hard might have directed it. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a charming movie.
Yeah.
And maybe that's all I can say. There's
scuzzily charming, I would imagine.
Scuzzily charming, and Treat Williams comes out of it probably most successfully and unscathed.
Right,
that's what I would say.
I'm glancing at Mark Goldblatt's filmography, and Phil.
It's Mark Goldblatt. Oh yeah.
Mark
Goldblatt, absolute legend.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring up the Devil's Own because, as we all know, Harrison Ford is one of the leads of The Devil's Own, and he was approached for this movie as well. And I mean this in the best way, but like, if you're not going to get Harrison Ford for this part, which frankly wouldn't fit, in my opinion, Treat Williams is like a great Han Solo. Like, he has that kind of roguish, like, it's not insignificant that he's introduced by like putting the woman whose name Una Damon, I believe is her name, on the front of the boat. Like, she's trying to fix something. He's like, how's it going out there? And she's like, go fuck yourself. Like, it has this kind of like, he's a little sadistic. And the fact that by the end of the movie, you kind of fall in love with this like rogue character who, by the way, at one point in the movie says, I have a bad feeling about this.
Yeah.
Like, it's very Han Solo influenced.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't go wrong. If you can do that, if you can kind of do a soft version or your own version or the action movie version of Han Solo and people aren't annoyed by it because that's such an iconic role, you're clearly doing something right. I think he is absolutely one of the keys to making this.
He's my favorite aspect. Like, I think I would have enjoyed the film regardless, but the reason I love it is because of Treat Williams,
Yeah, and I think it's a signal to the audience that this is a swashbuckling hero and a swashbuckling tone.
Yeah.
Right? Like Indiana Jones, like, I think he's trying to, the Harrison Ford thing signals we're trying to do an Indiana Jones-esque escapist, cliffhanger entertainment. And you're right, like, I can't think of a lot of other actors in that age range at that time that could have done it. And Ben like filled that archetype, filled that sort of cutout that Harrison Ford would leave. We would probably all be hard pressed to name who that person would have been. It's also just inspired. Like, he hadn't done a lot up until that point recently to put him in the public,
not leads in big movies, right? Like,
And I kind of romanticize this idea of like Things to Do in Denver and You're Dead, and the turn he gives in that is what led him to this lead. Like, days when indie film was catapulting people into these lead roles at big
I
studio
think so.
genre
I mean,
pictures.
that's what I knew. That's where the only thing I really knew him from at that point
Yeah.
in my, sort of film education. And he is so great in Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, and it's such a showy role, and he gets some incredible scenes, and he has that similar sense of like humor, but there's also a badassery to that character.
Yeah.
So
can we also be honest? No one's naming movie Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead anymore. Like, that is such a killer title.
It's
Like,
a great
incredible.
title.
It's incredible.
It's a great title, and I think he is he exudes danger, and he's lethal. And I think even in this role, he brings an edge that is a little unpredictable.
Yeah, gives it a bit more. Brendan Fraser probably could have done this, but it wouldn't have had that. They both landed in the right movie.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the lady of this motion picture, Famke Janssen, as this name as well, by the Trillion St. James. It reminded me of like St. John Smythe from View to a Kill. Like
totally. Well, it's self-awareness again. It's like it's a totally
ridiculous.
absurd name for a character.
But
Yes.
I mean, she's also remarkable in this film, and is similarly, I think, sort of so dialed into the tone.
She helps define the tone of this movie, I think. She plays a huge role when she gets captured, the kind of glib one-liners.
Yeah.
I kind of wish Famke Janssen had played more parts like this.
I agree. I think from a physical standpoint, she feels capable. She feels like his equal, which I think you can't underestimate that. Like on screen, she reads as she can handle these scenarios. But you're right. Like there is a sense of humor there and a self-awareness and a glint in her eye that I think invites the audience in. She's really compelling in the movie. And I'll be honest with you, I don't always love her, but I loved her in this quite a bit. I thought she was really good.
Famke, I always love you.
How can you not always love her? That is a head scratcher for me. She is also an unusual character, though, isn't she? Because she's a thief. Like, she's not like a saint. She's not. She's actually kind of like they're both like kind of on the wrong side of the law a little bit, on the wrong side morally. Which is fun and refreshing.
Yeah, it feels a little Hitchcockian.
Yes,
in a really cool way.
Classical in some ways.
That's a great comp. I wouldn't have thought of that, but yes, they're kind of like eyeing each other in that Hitchcock way that the female and male protagonists often do. That's great.
And the other thing I like about both of them is that they're smarter than their captors. And it's very clear from the beginning with both of them that they are smarter than these people, and you're just waiting for them to outthink them. Or to put something into action. And I think that tension is there right from the beginning. You're just kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop in a really fun way.
Yeah.
Boy, this movie kicks ass. Sorry, just real quick. This movie kicks ass. It just kicks ass. It's very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Let's talk about the villain then. Anthony Heald as Simon Canton. Classic corporate crook, a little bit of an Ellis, a little bit of Ellis in there, a little bit of that kind of Ellis slime. I do have, if you guys want to hear, I have a little story about Anthony Heald. Okay, so going back like 10 years ago, there was a thing, I think it's still around, but it was basically you could sublet your apartments to industry people through a kind of private network, so that you had to be like referred by somebody, so that you were it was all a little bit more safe and legitimate, right? And it was kind of on the honor system, right? So I was leaving for the UK for a while, and I was going to sublet my apartment, and the person who reached out was Anthony Heald, right? And I still remember this because I'm a big fan of his, right? A lot of his stuff, and he plays a lot of really crazy and often disturbing characters. Great. The most iconic one being Dr. Chilton from Silence of the Lambs, which he's probably mostly widely recognized for, but other parts like in movies like 8mm and Proof of Life, were these kind of movies, right? So I'll always remember because I had this voicemail from him because his tone was like this, right? And he goes, Philip, Tony Heald here, just calling about your place. Wanted to see if I could come by. So and it was like amazing. So eventually he comes by, we sit by the pool, and to come and have a look at the apartment, and he was doing, because he's a proper actor, he's a Shakespeare guy. He'd just done an Oregon Shakespeare Festival. and was coming to LA to, for whatever reason. And but he was lovely, and but it struck me he was just such a proper like man of the theater, down to earth, humble working actor, and it was just a cool way to meet. In the end, he never his plans changed, and he didn't end up subletting the apartment, sadly. But I did get
what a
to
Hollywood
meet him
story,
and he's perfect for this. He's so great as, again, everybody understood the assignment, to use your your turn of phrase.
Yeah, and they all, I think it's so fascinating that I like when a director smartly uses the baggage an audience has with an actor to help inform it, just in terms of economy. Like, everybody knows him from Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
He's not reliable, he's not trustworthy, and I think they use all that to their advantage in a really great way. He just looks like an asshole too. He's just such an evil face.
yeah.
I was like, have you ever seen him play like a good guy? I couldn't even.
It's hard to think. I wonder what the kind of Shakespearean parts that he plays and how he's different.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That tracks.
Is Wes Studi also a villain in your mind, or
the one thing I wonder about Wes Studi in this movie is like, are you too good an actor for this film? Do you understand what I mean by that?
I do.
This is a guy who has so much gravitas and is so serious and kind of can't play a false note. This is the guy from Last of the Mohicans, Heat, right? Many, many more. And I almost wonder with him, he's so good in this, but that he might be the only one that is maybe not as tonally in sync because he's almost too good. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense.
Yeah, there's something he does in this movie though that I thought it's a credit to how good of an actor he is it's an unspoken trust that he builds with Treat Williams' character. And you watch him become convinced that maybe his best ally in all of this is this guy. And they never really even have dialogue to that end. But by the point where they're actually in the hallway with guns drawn, teaming up, it feels like it's earned in a weird way because of the work I think particularly Wes Studi does, building that relationship. I thought it was really impressive.
One thing that I think is true about that character is that it might be the most underwritten part in the movie, because a lot of it is just him making like threats.
Yeah.
Right. And to Wes Studi's credit, he understands, like, I'm an actor and I have to bring a physical and visual presence. I mean, very few actors have the visual and physical presence that Wes Studi has. He does everything with his look and his eyes. And so, like, it's weirdly like a better performance than the writing, which may be why it's a little incongruous, incongruous, because, like, he's finding something that may not have been there on the page, but like they figured out it. He
has some great moments, but it's like the weirdest backhanded compliment to give is that you're potentially too good an actor for this type of material in a weird way.
He's also in Mystery Man the next year, so like kind of an interesting year.
So he's just
stretching his legs.
He's not funny.
Paychecks.
Yeah.
He's not. He just doesn't come across as funny. He's just very, very intense and serious, which is what you need for this character to be intimidating. But maybe he doesn't quite have the sort of nimble footwork required necessarily for a film like this. But maybe also you needed that balance of this character is very intense and serious and intimidating. Let's talk a little bit about this film on the action level. As our another one of our tenets of anatomy of an action movie. I mean, the rotating guns are fucking cool, man.
Dude, they're so rad.
Aren't they? The
it's
noise
so unnecessary, and yet it's so cool.
Gosh.
And I actually really like the sound effect they used for them. Like, it sounds badass. I was like, this is really cool.
Sure. Yeah, it reminds me of like a movie that we'll probably do on our spin-off show, 48 Hours of Body Movies, Dark Angel. AKA I Come in Peace, where the guns are like have this they've really put the time in for the sound design for the guns, and it makes like a massive difference when you put in that kind of effort, right? You across that movie, Rob?
The fact that you dropped it means I'm in the right place. Because I'm obsessed with that movie.
I didn't even know this movie existed until I went
to...
Dude, it is so well done.
Yeah.
And Craig Baxley directed it, written secretly by David Toohey. I know, not David Twohy. David Koepp.
David Koepp.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Yep.
Amazing movie, shot in Houston. I know way too much about Dark Angel. And you're right though. Like, its explosions in that movie feel so fucking cool, and the guns
feels robust. It doesn't feel flimsy.
That's right. That's right. And also very funny. A very funny movie.
Yes. Similar. If you, I'll throw that out as a recommendation for people as well. If you like this kind of tone, which does keep a sense of stakes, is gory, is violent, is a sort of absolutely a B movie right down the middle, but is like the best possible version of it with real craftspeople and the right actors at the center of it. If you like that kind of, if that's your jam, then check out Dark Angel, starring Dolph Lundgren, aka.
And then subscribe to 48 Hours of Buddy Movies coming to an RSS feed near you.
I will also just name drop. Brian Benben is so good in that movie, like as the mismatched partner.
He's married to Madeline Stowe, isn't he? What a player.
You go do that movie, then you marry Madeline Stowe.
I know, wow.
What a great, he's very, very good.
He was from the show Dream On, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, and he makes Lundgren, he really makes the relationship credible by virtue of his performance. It's really good.
It's a super fun movie. But the action in this film as well, like, I love the ship. I love Finnegan's ship. It reminded me when I was a kid, I had this like G.I. Joe Tiger Shark thing that was like a river, like a river gunboat,
Yeah.
That's fun. No, the time and effort been put into the design of those things, like that just looks really cool. Did you guys have any favorite like action moments, stunt set pieces, flurries of action that particularly floated your boat?
I am a huge fan of I am a huge fan of Spielbergian awe in this movie, because it's like when they see the big tentacles towards the end and they're just kind of standing there, and just the way that's built. I mean, you can't really beat a jet ski going through another boat. Like, that's just the raddest shit ever. I think the disgusting skeleton gore is incredible. Like, it's really incredible. Gross. Gruesome. It's like, it's disgusting. It's Verhoeven-esque, I would say, just to make sure that we get him into the show somewhere.
Well done.
Yeah. And then I think the last,
Liam. Well done.
Yeah, and I think the last thing that I'll say is that Treat Williams having that shotgun on his person is just like, like action movie. Like, that's the juice for me. When it's like, oh, by the way, I have this like sawed off shotgun. It's incredible.
It's badass. It's like Indiana Jones with his whip and his revolver. Like, he's got all the sort of accoutrements that you want your swashbuckling action hero to have. And
totally.
Yeah. I love the scene in the hallway with him that ends up in the elevator. I'm like you. I love a good elevator sequence, and I think he uses them to really good effect here.
The sound effects are scary when they're in the elevator and you're like, I can't do this sound. It sounds like the Cthulhu guy. But yeah, those kinds of sound effects.
What we're kind of, I think, all agreeing on as well is like that this film sort of satisfies on each of its, like, on an action level, it's satisfying. On a horror level, it's satisfying. And on a humor level, our final tenet, it's also like possibly the most satisfying. It's because I think, yes, I enjoy the action, and yes, I enjoy the gore and everything, but actually it's the humor that I think that puts it over the top.
Well, and if I can offer one, I'll speculate on why I think one of the reasons the movie didn't do as well as it maybe could have is I do think the monster. Whereas you have Tremors, and the graboid is right on the poster of that movie. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what the boogeyman is, and in the movie you see it a lot, despite the fact that it's underground. Jaws is the same way. Jaws is on the poster. You see that shark. After 90 minutes, you understand what the threat is. And I think even The Relic, at a certain point, they really feature that monster, despite how dark that movie is. I think until the end of this, like, I think the rules of the monster, like its reach, where it is and how it gets to where it is. If I could make one criticism, and it's the only one I would probably make of this movie, it's that it's not entirely clear how it moves around the ship. And then when you see how big it is, I think it becomes even more confusing to a certain extent, despite it being very cool. And that's one, I think they couldn't put it on the poster because they didn't fully have it figured out.
Right.
That's what I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about it. It's a great point. Yeah, because the geography of it and the specificity of it, and to be honest, I can't even picture it in my mind actually, which I think kind of tells you, like, it's a little bit like, yeah, it's hard to kind of grasp, I suppose, as a piece of creature design.
Well, and
Unlike
even the Blob,
Predator or, you know.
exactly, or the Blob is omnipresent in a similar way in that movie, but they feature it a lot. It swallows the phone booth and crushes the people in it. It pulls people down into the drains, but you understand how it works,
Right?
And
the rules of it are clear. Yeah,
that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also wonder if maybe, you know, in a more advanced CGI age, you would have like a final shot of the monster like pulling the boat into the ocean that would reveal its final shape. But like, you know, I wouldn't say the special effects in this are dicey, but like they are pushing up against the limits of what I think
they're off their time, aren't they?
Yeah,
you know?
and it's good production that you go like, we can't fully pull this off, so let's pull off what we can, right?
Yeah. And I will say, I don't think it's always uncommon in Hollywood. And Phil, maybe you've had this experience, right? Like where the monster's figured out after the fact. Like the set pieces, you know, like in a lot of the set pieces in this movie aren't dependent on actually seeing it. And so they probably knew how those things functioned, how a woman's getting pulled out of the boat. But you don't necessarily know what it looks like or the logic of how it gets from A to B.
Yeah, creature design often can be a fluid thing, especially on like a big production. You know, they can change as, you know, especially with a production that involves a lot of complex logistics and water and, you know, all of these other kind of things that might be difficult to shoot or difficult to shoot in and so forth. So, but yeah, that it's a minor criticism because I think the film is so fun that it doesn't really bother me. But I think that's fair comment.
Can I offer one more set piece that I think is small but works really well, which is when they have to dive underwater and swim through that passageway to get out? Like, I think when movies do that, it's like, it's a very simple way to create suspension tension because, like, you don't know what's under there. Right. You don't know how long they're going to be there. And, like, I like... Daylight Phil does this a little bit too. I like when these movies kind of go like, okay, there's a fork in the road, and it's genuinely tense when you're watching someone. There's a moment where someone is swimming under there and you hear no sound, and you're like... This guy's fucked, right? Like it's just really it's a simple way where you don't need the creature to create really strong tension in movies like these.
Yeah, because you never know when something's going to burst forth from the murky depths. Let's throw on our tuxedos and head over to the Die Hard Oscars, aka the Action Movie Awards. We have four.
I'm going to put on my wetsuit. It took me a long time to think of what it was going to be.
I was watching you say that. I saw it come to you as I have. As
the True Lies thing. Yeah. Emerge from under the water. So the John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Line. This is a well-written, like, it's Zinger City.
Zinger City.
What is that line? I remember this in the trailer where they're in the elevator and someone goes, "What is that?" And Joey goes, "The girl from Ipanema." Because the Muzak is still playing through the, you know, so that kind of nailed a great example of summarizing the tone of the movie. This was a great line. Treat Williams goes, "Know how to use it?" Hands her a gun. She goes, Trillian goes, "Yeah, if something comes at me, I'll just pull the trigger until it goes away."
Great.
Just delightful. And this bit of just like, I forgive me because I can't possibly replicate Treat Williams' astonishingly accurate comic timing. But when at the end of the movie and he goes, "Well, looks like we're stuck on this island." And then she kisses him and he goes, "Well, looks like we're stuck on this island." I was just like, this movie is fantastic. And then, of course, his catchphrase. He even has a catchphrase, right? "Now what?"
Now what?
Which ends the movie. So those were the ones that I picked. Any additions, thoughts, picks?
I have one that I know was an improv, which is Joey saying, or Kevin J. O'Connor saying, "Can you just get asthma?" I love that line. I thought
oh yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Can you just get asthma in the moment?
I mean, we should talk about him for a sec. I mean, well, I guess is he going to come?
I assume he's going to come up.
Yeah, he's going to come up in a second. So yeah, he's going to come up in a second. So we'll pause that for a sec. There was a really bad line, I will say, which was, "I hate this water stuff," as said by T-Ray. That needed another pass. They should have brought me in for a little polish on that one. But
I wrote that line. No.
Let's move on to then the Hans Gruber Exceptional Thief Award for stealing the film. And our nominees are Wes Studi as Hanover, Kevin J. O'Connor as Joey Panucci. Am I saying I'm always so afraid of mispronouncing. Is it Jimon Honsu? Am I saying that correctly?
I think it's Jimon Hansu, yeah.
Jimon Honsu as Vivo and Jason Fleming as Mulligan are my 4 nominees. Would you have an additional nominee or a pick from those gentlemen?
Not me. No, I mean, I think we all know who's, of that list, who's the one. Yeah, for sure.
It's got to be Kevin J. O'Connor.
Yeah, I love this guy. And I love that Summers uses him in the same capacity in all these other movies. It's great.
He's like his muse.
Yeah.
I think it's so great. And I think Kevin J. O'Connor is just like, he's like Willem Dafoe without the same kind of stature, right?
Yeah.
Like he's kind of weird. He has this thing that he does that's like very specific. and he really owns these roles. Yeah, I love Kevin J. O'Connor. And I also especially love him because he's incredible in There Will Be Blood.
It is crazy that he has this like auteurist swath that he's also with other with he's worked in a couple of P.T. Anderson films.
I just want to very quickly shout out Jason Fleming because I'm a huge Lock Stock guy. He's
great.
He's so good. And Phil, are you a Lock Stock guy?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. We are dealing with copious amounts of ganja here.
Just do as I say. Keep the fucking cage locked. Yes.
That is an amazing Stephen McIntosh. That is unbelievable.
That was very effective. That was very, very good.
I do love that line delivery. Let's talk about the Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie. I've got 3. Trevor Goddard as T-Ray, Cliff Curtis as Mamuli, and Anthony Heald, the front runner, the bookie's favorite, as Simon Canton. Would you guys have a pick?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I like the mercenaries as well, and I feel like we're not representing them enough because I think as a unit they're really effective. I think they're really well cast.
I totally agree, and it's a crazy who's who of character actor. I want to just shout out very quietly, or not quietly at all, but Cliff Curtis has an unbelievable couple of years after this movie because he's in Three Kings and Training Day, and he walks away with both of those movies. He's very powerful. He's so good.
Also
powerful
Virus,
actor.
which is sort of the same movie as this.
I've never seen that. Where'd you land on that one, Rob?
This is a far superior movie to that one. But that it's worth a watch, Phil. I think you should check it out. Just because I think the practical effects in it are wildly impressive. Because it was directed by an effects person, but the movie is it just doesn't. It's nowhere near as fun as this show.
I just love a sort of badly received late 90s genre movie. Yeah. That's
the juice, baby.
That's what I need.
I think you'll be startled at how similar the two movies are.
Yeah, and
they're very similar.
Incredible actors in it.
Yeah.
Final Oscar is the Best Death, presented by Marco.
Ooh.
No more table. Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate. My wife is working from home, and I hope that.
I think you took. We're getting into an acting off after my Lock Stock thing. You were like, I'm gonna turn up the juice.
No,
on
Phil,
this.
listen. Let me be humble in this moment. That was RSC level Stephen McIntosh. Let's be real. I
do love Stevie Mac. Best Death. We've got five nominees. I think you mentioned this, Rob. I can't remember if we were on air or off air, but the female passenger getting sucked into the toilet during the initial monster attack. Pretty great death.
It's amazing.
In fact, this film's full of them. Jimon Honsu taking an axe to the head. That was a little much for me, to be honest. And it's also really shocking. It doesn't give you a chance. You don't get a chance to grab the cushion. So my dad's going to be pretty upset when he sees that because he's not good with gore. And he'd be like, I'll give you a fair warning on that one, Dad. Mason, played by Clifton Powell, blowing himself up as he's dragged away by the monster.
Yeah.
That guy,
this was This was a brilliant piece of writing, I thought, when Wes Studi's character Hanover wastes his last bullet and is therefore unable to kill himself as the monster is consuming him, was genius writing.
I love that.
That would
dark.
probably be
It's
dark, but within the context of the movie, it was really, really clever. And then Simon Canton getting blown up on Finnegan's boat. Would be. I mean, this is it delivers again on the deaths as a sort of gore.
Good
on the
deaths.
gore level, like the deaths are inventive and clever.
No, I mean Summers is like so good at the gratuity. Like he just like it's depressing to me that he's not active right now as a filmmaker, because I feel like what audiences want right now is what he's delivering, or what he delivered. Like even his G.I. Joe movie, I think, is underrated now in retrospect. Like you go back and watch it, and it is a really fun rendering of that brand, if not a little sanitized. But I think in the case of these deaths, like he knows what the audience wants, and he delivers on it.
He's also really good at building dread.
Yes.
Like I'm thinking about those deaths and like the mummy when the scabbard comes out and all the bugs. Like it's really like it's funny that the mummy, which is kind of like pretty family friendly, is still a little scary.
It's scary when it needs to be. Yeah,
I'm gonna watch that tonight. Holy crap! I love that movie.
I think he's really skilled at a number of different things, and he's able to get them all to coalesce into one cohesive, tonally synced movie. Which, I mean, you could say that's the job of a director, but it's not as easy.
But
this
is high level stuff too. It's like I think underrating how hard it is to do this is very common, because people think these movies are flimsy or
especially
silly.
Because it's two seemingly disparate tones of like hardcore R-rated horror and a sort of like swashbuckling Indiana Jones style romp.
Yeah, and I am curious, like knowing this movie was not a success for Hollywood Pictures, how did he parlay that into directing a big budget movie the next year in The Mummy?
People must have just seen the talent, right? They must have just looked at it and gone, this guy can execute. Like, give him a property that's like, the reasons this film failed were nothing to do with the actual film. They were like, to your point, Rob, like the marketing, the stars, and the release timing of another behemoth of Titanic, like just sucking away all of the audience, right?
That's right.
So it's nothing to do with how he directed the movie.
Yeah.
You also wonder if they didn't have a lot of faith in this movie. Releasing a movie in late January in the 90s and early 2000s was like, I remember people be like, that's like graveyard time. It's like there are movies that we don't, it's unfortunate because I think a bigger push, this movie could have.
It's expensive as well. I mean, if it had been made for less, I
agree.
45 million is an awful lot of.
Especially back then. I mean, that is a big budget failure. And my guess is Treat Williams probably took a lot of the blame, not because of his performance, but because of his value.
Right.
And in the marketing, I do think not having a tangible villain or boogeyman that you could put on the poster is tough.
Well, I never saw it. That tells you a lot. And this was my cup of tea in theory, and I loved it. So I was running, I was slow to the party on that. Let's move to our last section of the show and wrap things up with the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz after this quick break. And we're back with our final section of the show, the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz, where the scores can really change. Okay, 3 quick questions. You know the rules. Collaboration is mandatory. You get 1 clue per question if you need it. Question number 1. Which member of the Deep Rising cast played the character who killed Martin Riggs's wife?
Is there a clue available?
There is a clue. You can phone a friend. You can call Al Powell. The clue is this. Although he played a South African in the film in question, this actor was born in Dublin, Ireland.
Oh, is it the guy who plays the captain?
It is.
I feel, I feel
it's kind of recognizable.
So good.
Yeah.
That's right.
He was a very good villain in Lethal Weapon 2. Really detestable.
Man, are there more detestable villains than the villains in Lethal Weapon 2?
No, those guys are brutal.
They're awful.
Am I going to have to do it? Does anyone want to do it, or am I going to have to do it?
Diplomatic immunity.
Someone had to do it. It was pretty. I actually feel a little bit hurt that I didn't release that from my system, but someone had to do it. If you mentioned
Lethal Weapon 2, it's just been revoked.
The answer is Derek O'Connor, who plays Captain Atherton, played the South African enforcer Peter Vorsted in Lethal Weapon 2, in which he admits that he killed Victoria Riggs by mistake and made the murder look like an automobile accident to cover up his boss's involvement. Question number 2. Which actress was originally cast in the role of Trillian St. James, but dropped out 3 days into filming due to creative differences?
Claire Forlani.
Is correct.
One of my childhood crushes. I loved her. Yeah.
Of course. Played Sean Connery's estranged daughter, Jade, in The Rock, as long-time listeners will recall.
Aww.
And I guess Meet Joe Black was probably her biggest swing.
Yeah.
I mean, she worked a lot.
Yeah, it was the same year.
Yeah.
You wonder.
It's also in Mystery Men.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Our final
I'm
question.
all over Mystery Men in this
This is a Mystery Man pod? I've never seen it. Question number 3.
It's good.
Which member of the Deep Rising cast plays the character of Bowman in Die Hard 4, a.k.a. Live Free or Die Hard?
Cliff Curtis.
Is correct. I was on thin ice with this week's trivia quiz because I was really worried that these things were going to come up. But,
my terrible confession is I've never gotten all the way through that Die Hard movie, so I think I know that I will at some point in the future. Look, if you like it, I'll like it.
We're going to get there. There's going to be a lot of equivocations.
Cliff Curtis, what an actor, man. What an actor.
He's very, very good. Plays the key role of Miguel Bowman in Die Hard 4, who is the deputy director of the FBI's cybersecurity division, plays Mamuli in Deep Rising. So it all comes back to Die Hard, people. Rob, thank you so much for coming back on the show and talking through this wonderful movie. Any final words, thoughts, plugs, anything you want to say?
No, I would just say, seek out Stephen Sommers' work. His Huckleberry Finn movie is actually really well done. And I think he's a guy that doesn't get credit and in many ways set the template for what the Marvel movies, started to do. He was doing it well before that. And I can tell you that my boss, James Wan, loves Stephen Sommers. And I cites him as an influence on him and the company all the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great to hear and makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much, Rob. We're going to get you out here guys, because you've got to go back to the real world and have production meetings. So
Tell James I'm still scared of The Conjuring, so thank you very much. I think about it when I wake up in the middle of the night. That scary lady on the top of the dresser.
And keep us informed about this RoboCop show. It sounds incredible.
Yeah.
So
I'm available to play RoboCop. Just putting it out there.
You're on the short list.
I have an acting degree. So...
You might have to shave. I don't think Robo has facial hair, but we'll get there.
Well, let's play in the sandbox a little bit. Let's see what we can do. Thanks, Rob.
All right, Rob, we're going to let you out here. See you soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
Rob Hackett. Rob Hackett is kind of one of the best guests ever, right?
Absolutely. He's such a delight, and I love that he's such a legitimate fan of these movies.
I know.
Terminal Velocity was such a fun episode and such a fun discussion. This one too, and this one's even closer to his kind of day-to-day wheelhouse. So getting his expertise on this was really insightful.
It's also not always easy to find someone who can talk intelligently and at length about these kinds of movies that are not, that are not dense. They're just incredibly well made.
Yes.
So thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob Hackett.
And thank you, Tyson Hubley, for continuing to make our beautiful artwork.
The glue that holds us together.
Show. You are our design glue. We love you, and we hope you're doing great. Let's catch up. Next time on the show, Desperate Measures with a very special guest. Are we saying who?
Mr. Mystery Guest. Let's keep it mysterious.
Let's keep it mysterious.
But I'm telling you, you're not going to want to miss this one.
This one hits close to home. Next time on the 48 Hours of Buddy Movies, our Patreon exclusive theme, Phil, a movie that I think you like.
I would say I love this movie and I want to tattoo it to my soul. It's To Live and Die in LA, William Friedkin's 1985 sleazy crime thriller masterpiece.
Yeah, we've been recording this episode for 14 days, so please be sure to... Oh, no! Speaking of our Patreon feed, we have 2 tiers. We have the $5 tier where you get 2 episodes a month for the price of a cup of coffee. A nice cup of coffee, let's be clear. But a cup of coffee nonetheless. And a $7 tier, which if you give us $7, you get a shout out on this feed. So I would like to shout out the following names. The following subscribers. Ryan Holmes.
Thank you, Ryan.
Dave Palace.
Thanks, Dave.
Dave is our buddy, Dave.
We know Dave.
We love Dave. David Rivera.
David Rivera in the house.
Yes, in the house. Bruce Kim.
Bruce, yeah. We always love a Bruce.
We love Bruce. Christopher Jones,
Christopher Jones, love it.
a name you'll recognize. Gilbert Martinez.
Oh, snap.
Who's going to be making his own podcast soon. That's
potentially with some collaborators you might know.
You know.
Gilbert's amazing. We're gonna hype his podcast. It's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, it has a lot in common with the movie that we just mentioned.
Yep.
Jameson McGonigal, who was my first LA friend, doesn't
Jameson
live here.
McGonigal.
Yeah, McGonigal. What a name!
I
huh?
love it.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like it's a whiskey / the character from The Simpsons. That's
Yes,
like
exactly. Or like a Harry Potter teacher.
I
It
love
could be
it.
any of those. Joe Llewellyn, who discovered us thanks to Chris Tapley.
Okay.
Episode of 48 Hours.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Joe.
Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
And last but in no means least, just last on the list of names that I'm reading, Mark Chandler, ladies and gentlemen.
Mark Chandler.
Yeah.
Sounds like a classy guy.
He sounds like a real nice guy. So if you want us to talk about you on this feed as we have it,
If you want me to do uncomfortable ad-libs
Yeah.
about your name,
I mean, that's worth the
This is
price
the
of
place
two
to
extra.
be.
Yeah, exactly. That's worth $15 a year or whatever the difference is. That's our list. If for some reason I missed you, let me know, but that should be everybody.
but seriously, like, we can't thank you enough for doing that. It really means so much when people are actually willing to, reach into their wallet and kick us a little coin, because this helps us to continue to produce this show as well as the other show. So your support means everything to us, and we're genuinely so grateful to each and every one of you. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the best. You guys are the best. And
So thanks for joining us today. We'll let you get out of here. We'll let you get on with your lives. I'm sure you've got stuff to do. We've taken up enough of your time.
listen, we'll be back next time with a god that I can't imagine would care. I've never seen the movie, so I can't give you anything else.
Free on
But I'm
Amazon Prime
excited.
at the time of recording. So check it out.
Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast created and hosted by Philip Gawthorne. Liam Billingham co-hosts and produces the show. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at DieHardOAB. Rate, review, follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, tell your movie podcast-loving friends about Die Hard on a Blank. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.
Hi guys, it's Phil
And Liam.
from Die Hard on a Blank, and we're excited to talk to you about a brand new podcast we're launching called 48 Hours of Buddy Movies.
That's right, folks. 48-hour-long
Approximately.
episodes exploring 48 different buddy movies, beginning with the original classic that started it all, Walter Hill's 1982 masterpiece, 48 Hours, starring Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy.
And just like Die Hard on a Blank, our new show will explore the influence of 48 Hours on the action genre, one buddy movie at a time.
We'll be covering iconic franchises such as the Beverly Hills Cop movies, the Stakeout movies, the Bad Boys movies, classics of the genre like Running Scared,
Iam's Hive Rise Up!
Midnight Run, Red Heat, Tango and Cash, The Hard Way.
Plus tough thrillers such as To Live and Die in LA, Black Rain, Point Break, Training Day, and The Way of the Gun.
As well as a few wild cards that you might not expect, such as RoboCop, Alien Nation, and, of course, Phil's favorite,
Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man!
So if you're a fan of two buddies talking buddy movies,
Then 48 Hours of Buddy Movies is for you!
visit patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe for the price of 1 cup of coffee a month.
See you in the squad car.
Or walking to the squad car, mildly irritated that we've been paired off.
Wherever. That's patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies to subscribe.